How's it going, everyone? Today we are on the BioDevils podcast once again. We are here to talk about some Onimusha. Very small cast today. Unfortunately, one of our guests was sick. I'm technically sick too, but it's okay because, we get to talk about some Onimusha. Hopefully, everybody gets better soon, and hopefully, nobody else gets sick. But without any further delays, you all know me as BioDevil Dom, and I am joined by Mr. Singh Long. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Do I want to?
Maybe.
Eh, not much to say on my end. Just about the usual for me, I guess. I always forget how I introduce myself the other times.
Yeah. And then we got Mr. Divic. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Howdy there, gamers. I'm just kidding. Hey, how's it going?
Alrighty, so with that all out of the way, let's get into our very first question. How did you first get into the first Onimusha?
At the time, I remember very specifically, I'd only gotten, I got a PS2 right when it came out. And we only had two games on it. We had Devil May Cry, and we had Resident Evil CVX. And I remember hearing about Onimusha. I think I had either read it in a magazine or something like that, and it was like basically Resident Evil Samurai, so I was like instantly sold. I think it came out pretty early in the PS2's life cycle, if I remember it correctly.
It was a launch title for the PS2, yep.
Oh, okay, yeah. So then I must have picked it up like within 2 or 3 weeks of getting a PlayStation 2. And played it several times over. But it was one of those things I heard about, and like Resident Evil Samurai, that's perfect. My dad was like, "Why are you getting another Resident Evil game?" I'm like, "I don't care." So, it was, yeah.
Yeah, I think in my case, my first exposure to the original Onimusha was oddly enough through Capcom's old ass website back in the day. Like just browsing it just to see what else they had at the time. They didn't really do a lot of exposure where I was, so it was like kind of a different thing for me. I didn't know that much about samurai back then, so like I knew it was like a horror-ish this title. Nowadays you don't see that with a lot of the later entries, but to me it definitely was a bit different. I was just kind of curious about it, but though it wouldn't be until like many years later when I'd actually get a chance to play the game myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me it was an interesting thing because I didn't find out about it at launch. I found out about it a couple of years after the fact, I think. Because I knew about Devil May Cry like right off the bat, and I think Onimusha I might have played like a year or two after, or I found out about it a year or two after, because my brother's dad got it. He got Devil May Cry, and he ended up getting Onimusha as well. And I remember I used to just watch him play those games, so that's how I found out about those games very early on. And with Onimusha, it was just kind of that game that like really, how could I put it? It like really caught my interest from like the very moment that I saw it, because it just looked so cool. Like I had never seen anything like that. I was so used to like Mario and like the Namco Arcade Museum or whatever the hell it was called back on like the PlayStation 2. I'm sorry if you guys can hear some background noise, by the way. But yeah, like it was so it was such an interesting like game, because like as soon as I seen it, it was like it was not the type of game that I was used to seeing at that time, because I was so used to just like more of like these kid friendly games that weren't really on like Nintendo, for example. But with that, why don't I get Divic to read off number 2?
Originally, Onimusha was meant to be a late PS1 game before becoming a launch PS2 title. What are your thoughts on the scrapped PS1 version?
So, so what little footage there is of the PS1 version, it looks cool. I kind of wish that like not that it like I'm glad that it came out on PS2. You know, I think that like there's a video somewhere out there with I think KG Inafune himself saying like, yeah, we made that decision to switch from the PlayStation 1 to the PlayStation 2 because it was the choice of either making it a late PlayStation 1 release or we can make it a launch title for PlayStation 2 here in Japan, and make way more money if it's a launch title as opposed to releasing it as a late PS1 title and maybe not many people playing it. On top of the fact that it unfortunately would have to get some cuts because they would have to start development from scratch. So they saved like essentially like the most important parts of the first game in its development, but they cut out a lot of things like the environments that are shown off in like one of the trailers or commercials that they had in Japan. And I'm not sure if there would have been any more like maybe like involvement with like Nobunaga and like the official story, or if there's going to be more like enemy types or anything like that. But it's definitely like an interesting thing to see, like compare and contrast, because there's like areas in that PlayStation 1 version that aren't in the Genma port.
Well, and like looking at it right now, there's definitely areas in the PlayStation 1 trailer that are in the main game, like just
Oh yeah,
obviously really upscaled and stuff like that.
yeah.
Or maybe the original resolution. I mean, we're talking about PS1 to PS2, so maybe it's even the original version of it, not upscaled. But they downscaled it for PlayStation or whatever. But I had actually never. I'd probably seen something about this, but forgot years ago. But watching the trailer right now while you were talking, it looks friggin' cool. I mean, I'm always going to be a sucker. I mean, you guys know me well enough. I'm always a sucker for the PS1 look and feel, like, the chunkiness and the texture warping and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I, love that. It looks cool as hell. But, I mean, Onimusha's awesome regardless. I mean, I like that game as it is. What I wanted on PlayStation, now that I've played it on PS2, probably not, but man, PlayStation version would have been so cool. It would have been, because I was using my PlayStation way past when I had my PlayStation 2 anyway. I still used my original PlayStation, so
it does kind of make you wonder what kind of technical limitations the PS1 would have probably constrained the game under if it stuck with that.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah. Well, and specifically the because you were mentioning they in that commercial, it's like they still have areas from the game that are still there. Like they definitely kept stuff in there for sure. Like there's areas that Samanosuke goes through that in the official build of the game he doesn't go through. Like it's areas that only Kaede goes through. But then there are definitely areas too that are I don't recall this ever being there, or that scenario where you're getting ambushed and stuff. That's definitely not there in the official build. So it's really interesting to see how it's gone from being a PlayStation 1 game to PlayStation 2 for sure. I think what's also interesting too is that there were apparently magazines mentioning that Capcom was working on a project titled Ninja for the N64, and that might have been Onimusha. But as far as I'm aware that Onimusha was originally known or going to be Sengoku Biohazard before being deemed too different to be a Resident Evil spin-off altogether.
Speaking of Resident Evil spin-offs, I'm wondering if Was it during the development of the PS1 or PS2 build where they encountered that glitch that became integrated in DMC's combat? Like if
Um,
anyone's familiar with that history.
yeah, so it was a glitch in Onimusha's development where they knocked an enemy up into like the air, and that little glitch, maybe it wasn't necessarily intentional, or maybe it was. We don't know, right? But that spawned Devil May Cry's combat, which, ironically enough, Devil May Cry was also a launch title for the PS2 and has some similarities here and there to Resident Evil, just like Onimusha does. So, but yeah, it was a glitch where like an enemy got like knocked up into the air, and then they were like, well, this is cool. Let's try to do this in a different type of game. Yeah, I want to ask you guys too, like, cause you know what's interesting in that original PS1 build is that Semenosuke does not have like the unique weapons that are in the PS2 version, which basically became a staple of the series. It was just like he had the gauntlet and he would have like gems that would give him magical powers, but for the most part, it was just his sword. Do you guys think that change was a good decision to give him like some more uniqueness with the weapons that he has?
I guess then at that point it'd be more of a question is, was it always meant to have just the single weapon, or did they always meant to have multiple weapons but only showed off the first because that's what they had available at the time?
It's possible,
Like, was
yeah.
that ever confirmed? Or I'm not too sure on that. Because I don't see there would be any limitations outside of probably some of Shibu's combos, but mm,
Yeah, well, maybe even Ryzen, because Ryzen, when he does the final strike, he jumps. So
I don't think animation-wise that would be an issue because you do see some extreme animations in Dino Crisis 2, for example. I think that's on the same engine
hmm.
that they were going off of, correct?
I really don't know too much about the PlayStation One scrapped version, and as far as I've looked into it, there wasn't a whole lot going around anyway. Like information on the old PS1 build is pretty hard to come by, as far as I know.
I guess the devs never really commented on if they've been able to do more with what they could do when they switched over to PS2, outside of like visuals.
Mm.
Well, and I know the game isn't very big, like on that disc, because it used one of those old blue discs, and I thought those had a lower capacity, if I'm not mistaken. Or
I
I
think
mean,
they were just using a CD-ROM outright.
yeah, it wasn't a DVD; it was a CD-ROM.
I don't well because I have the what is it the Onimusha Essentials package on PS2.
Mhm.
And as far as I recall, it doesn't have the blue disc. Because I know what you're talking about. There are PS2 games
Yeah.
that absolutely use that blue backed disc or whatever. But as far as Onimusha goes, I don't recall it ever using that.
Oh, I mean, that could be like Mandela effect bullshit happening to my brain.
But yeah, I mean the game's pretty small. Like even with the well with the official build, it's pretty small because it's only a 4 hour game. Unless if we're talking about the Genma port, which adds an additional 2 hours to the game, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But yeah, it's not like I'm sure they could have packed way more into the disc at the time. They just couldn't because of the having to start from scratch and already burning through funds on that project.
Right.
All right, so I think we covered this pretty well enough, though. So, Singh, why don't you go ahead and read off number 3?
Onimusha Warlords is unique in that it's a horror-themed samurai action adventure game. What made you like the game? I guess when I actually kind of got around to like looking at it a bit more, like it goes back to what I originally said about the game. It was different from what else I played at the time.
Hmm.
Like even though it's not the first samurai game I played, like the way they kind of presented it like as this more horror themed, though not outright horror game, kind of appealed more to me. Like you didn't really have to worry about jump scares or anything like that. It was just more a matter of basic survival, just knowing how to deal with the combat. Although, like I said, I never really got to mess with the combat until I actually got to play the game. But like even with the story, like with the mix of historical and mythological aspects, like I thought that was pretty neat. Like not a lot of games did that back then, and yeah, pretty much just a different experience for me.
Hmm.
When I was when I had gotten the PlayStation 2, and when I was younger than that, I mean, like, you know, the whole samurai bit was starting to become really interesting to me because I was actually able to, like, read about some of that and, you know, actually kind of found out who, you know, Nobunaga Oda actually was. And I thought it was the most ridiculous thing that he was some kind of, like, you know, in this game, the premise is like he's asking demons to like help him take over Japan or win this war or whatever the hell's going on. So I was like, cool, I'm sold for this crazy goofy shit. And I was super into Resident Evil. You know, I was still playing Resident Evil 2, 3, Dino Crisis, Code Veronica. So I was still into the very classic Resident Evil tank controls and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, that with swords, I'm like, perfect. Like, that's what I've wanted in a Resident Evil game, was to, like, run up with a melee weapon and slap zombies around. So if I could do that in a game where I'm playing as a samurai, that's even cooler.
Yeah. See, I'm glad you brought up, like, the ridiculousness of, like, yeah, it's like Nobunaga gets fucking offed in the beginning of the game, right? And then gets resurrected because the demons took interest in him. They thought he was, you know, like in lore, they thought he was like evil enough to be worth resurrecting. And like, you know, like it sounds like the typical Capcom ridiculousness that like we all know and love. Like Capcom is very good at making a ridiculous plot.
Yeah, I mean, and it was that era of like every Capcom plot is ridiculous, and it even has there is a little bit in that game, and I'm thinking of, I can't remember her name, the Wasp woman. But with her, there's like some of that. I think so. There's some of that weird like body horror that's like present in the Parasite Eve games. That goes on with her. There's like weird body horror just in general in the game at some points, and it's like it kind of comes out of left field and then it goes away. But like, yeah, the whole concept of like fighting demons as a samurai, like, and all this other weird shit, it's so off the wall that it was just like perfect for me.
And then you kind of get into the like the more subdued aspects, like the freaking opening. Like literally, the game just opens up with you seeing like maggots chewing out some guy's eye, if I remember right.
Yeah. It's yeah, even that very beginning is literally just zoomed in on a guy's eye. Actually, no, correction. It's zoomed in on a maggot's eye as it's, you know, as we zoom out and see like the skull there. Fucking Nobunaga rides over it, and you know, they have the Battle of Imagawa. So like they're fucking up the Imagawa like left and right. And you know, Samanosuke is just watching in the distance. He's not even part of the battle. He just wanted to fucking spectate. But yeah, that whole opening is just really really cool because like you have like this whole like cinematic aspect of it too, because they were really pushing the fact that, hey, like we're also working with Takeshi Kaneshiro. And you know, it's like that was like a big deal because like not many games were really doing that, and especially having like his not only his likeness but using his voice for the character in the Japanese dub. Like, you know, they were really trying to push that.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's so many like very specific close because like you look at other mainline titles that were coming out at the time, and everybody's face looks kind of good. Dante's looks a little jank, but like, man, Onimusha, the Samanosuke's facial model looks really fucking good.
Yeah.
Like, and he is front and center in a shitload of the game.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like they really do a lot of the close-up shots with him. Um, yeah. Even I think even in the mini game that you get to unlock to try to unlock fucking ultimate mode, like they really zoom in on his face at the end. Like, like we get it. You want to jerk off this man? It's okay. Like, but yeah, no, like I think like Onimusha is great in that, like, you know, it being unique from like Resident Evil or like Devil May Cry, for example, because this was at the time where like this is old Capcom where they would take an idea, they would make Resident Evil and take an idea and be like, okay, like let's try to do this. It's too different. Let's turn it into another franchise, right? And that's something that I miss a lot about old Capcom. I wish they would have done that with some of their more recent Resident Evil entries or DLC. Looking at Shadows of Rose, just saying. But like, you know, they would take that, right, and then turn it into a completely different thing, and try to make something new out of it and make it successful in its own right. And that's how we, you know, essentially got Onimusha. And Onimusha, like, just much like Devil May Cry or even Dino Crisis, they really, like, started off that first game with, like, more of an emphasis on horror. Even though, you know, as the sequels rolled out, we got more action-based games, and rightfully so, where the transition to action for like a franchise like Onimusha or Devil May Cry or Dino Crisis makes way more sense than it did for Resident Evil, like ever did. But you know, that being said, like that unique kind of blend of like, hey, yeah, like here's a bunch of horror shit, but you're also a samurai and you got magic powers and you could like burn the shit out of enemies or like electrocute them and stuff like that. Like that wasn't really done a whole lot. And even then, typically you would think of like, okay, like more of like a Western style RPG that had like no samurai influence whatsoever or very little of it, if at all, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what really made Onimusha like so unique in that respect. So anyway, let me go ahead and read off number 4 here. Genma Onimusha really mixed things up in terms of difficulty as well as item placement. What were some of your favorite changes in this version of the game if you've played it?
So this would be a tricky one for me because even though I do have Genma, I haven't really gotten far into it. I actually had to restart my playthrough recently just because I kind of fell out of it and figured I may as well start from scratch. The only real change I could comment on was the additional green element, which I thought was an interesting mechanic because it kind of encourages more aggressive gameplay in that you had to like absorb that element as soon as it came out. Otherwise, if you just let it sit for too long, like the enemies would be able to absorb it for themselves and get the power boost that you would normally get from that.
Yeah.
Like I kind of felt that like adding that sense of urgency to combat kind of just changes the flow like from the original in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure. I think you know, because I mentioned this in my review, like, because they have like the it's like a tug of war to get that green soul. And I personally, I feel like that green soul was just a way to like test out the mechanic for the purple souls that we see in like Onimusha 2 and 3. Because they work in a very similar manner, except for enemies just can't absorb them. But you get like some type of ability out of it, if I can speak English today. Um, and it overall turned things towards your favor. Granted, the green soul doesn't work towards like bosses, which is great, but like, could you imagine how much more fucking harder the bosses would be, and that version of the game would be if they could absorb the green souls?
I just straight up rage quit.
I could already see it now. Fucking Marcellus 2 with green souls. Yeah.
God, I can't even imagine.
For me though, like I think my favorite change in the Genma port specifically is the fact that they added in more unique armors instead of just recoloring them, because this was before 2 and 3 where they decided to go the route of, well, if your swords change when you level them up, what if we had your armor and your all of your other stuff change based off of how you level them up, right? So so to me it was really cool to see, like, okay, like, yeah, you got like the thief armor or the metal armor, or the metal armor was like my favorite, but I also really like the ogre armor. But we'll talk about armor sets and all that stuff a little bit later too. But like it was so cool being able to get the armor and actually feeling like, okay, like, yes, it gets the defensive upgrades and stuff like that, but it also has a visual change, and it doesn't look like you're just wearing the same armor that's just getting recolored. Did you want to go on this, Divic, or?
Never played the Genma port.
Oh, really?
Yeah, never did. The only stuff that I saw from it was the stuff that when Jared was talking about it in his video.
Uh-huh.
That's it.
Okay.
I never got a chance to play it because I was like, I have Onimusha. Like, why do I need to get this version of Onimusha? Because I was, stupid. But yeah, I want to play it at some point, but I think his Xbox emulation sucks. I would have to get an original Xbox to do it. It looks cool as shit. But
It's fun. I will tell you right now, though, if you felt like the original game was difficult in any way, then the Genma port is even more difficult.
I didn't think the original game was difficult, but I'll talk about that, I think, with our with the next question that we get to, because yeah, because when it comes to difficulty, it's Onimusha is really difficult to a point, and then it's like you coast really fucking hard. At least at least the last time I played it, that's how it went.
Yeah, Genma is difficult because of the enemy placement and the amount of enemies they start throwing at you, because the Xbox could just handle it. And not only that, but you also have the additional Phantom Realm, and the Phantom Realm has a boss, and that boss is very difficult. And on top of that, you have a fucking doll that chases you around. That could only get hurt by magic and charge attacks, so it's like, that alone makes that game way more difficult. Because the item placement, like the arranged item placement, is not the biggest deal in the world. It's the fact that you have to deal with all the extra shit that the game is throwing at you that it didn't throw at you in the PS2 port. On top of the new enemies, on top of the new mechanic. So it's a fun time. For sure. Like, I highly recommend playing that version of the game. Only for the only for the chance to be able to experience the game in a different way that you might not have experienced it before.
Gotcha.
But yeah, with that said, you want to go ahead and read off number 5 then, Divic?
It's number 5 we're on? I thought we were on 6.
Yeah, we're on 5.
I'm stupid.
Yep.
Okay, so between the original PS2 version, Genma, and the HD port, which is your favorite, and what makes you like it more than the other versions? I will stick tried and true and say PS2 port to me, honestly, because man, that soundtrack is a banger. I don't care, and I know we'll probably talk about some of that at some point with soundtrack, but
yeah, we will.
That soundtrack is a fucking banger. There's a lot of that music that lives like completely, it's like
rent free,
classic,
yeah.
Very rent free. It's classic Resident Evil style. It's just goofy enough. There's like some superhero sounding themes in it. And then because I didn't play a lot of the HD port that came out recently, I don't know if they retouched the dub or anything like that, but just I was telling you about this the other day, Dom, where the game opens up and they're like, oh, hey, Samanosuke, you can take the western pass or you can just go up this way. And he's like, Kaede, you go ahead and take that way. And she goes, understand, and then runs away.
Yeah.
Just like, it's like settling into a warm blanket. I'm just like, oh, terrible dub, weird music. Like, I'm down.
Yeah. So the HD port did not touch up the English dub. It did, however, touch up the Japanese dub. We'll be talking about that specifically because it has some connection to the main actor for the game. But yeah, the Japanese got touched up technically. Some of the characters got recast in the new Japanese dub on the HD remaster. I don't know the specific reasons for the recastings other than, it's just there. So, but for me, it's weird because I like all of them. So I don't have a version that I don't dislike. Because I know, like people bring up, well, new soundtrack, it's not as good. I don't personally think that the new soundtrack is bad. But it's definitely not the original soundtrack. The original soundtrack was clearly made with that in mind. Had, that whole situation with the composer not happened, I'm sure we would have gotten that original soundtrack. What still weirds me out, though, is that no one in the modding community has went out of their way to fucking mod the original soundtrack back in, though. That's the weird thing to me. But if I had to go with a specific version, it's very split between Genma and the HD port. Genma specifically because of all the changes that they added in and new mechanics that they had. Onimusha HD, on the other hand, is more so the mechanics that they also introduced in this version that were not in either of the two versions. The fact that you could weapon swap now is a really cool addition, because you couldn't do that before, and I really want to see, in the future, if they ever do an Onimusha 2 HD remaster, I want to see if they can improve upon it, because right now with Onimusha 1 it's just you can only switch weapons when you're standing still. So I want to see if maybe they could change it to have it maybe a little bit more like Devil May Cry, where it's seamless. I don't want Onimusha to become Devil May Cry, because then Onimusha would be in the same situation that Resident Evil is in, where it's just Devil May Cry but with samurai, right? And that's the last fucking thing that I want, because that was the same issue that both Resident Evil and Onimusha had when they first came out, is that it's Resident Evil but with swords and guns, or it's Resident Evil but set in feudal Japan with demons and swords, right? So yeah, I'm very split. Mostly from a gameplay standpoint, that the HD version is good for that very reason. But the Genma port is also very good for all the changes that it makes.
I guess for me, obviously I can't really comment too much on the PS2 port or the Genma port for that matter. My only like full experience was with the HD port, which for a lot of the reasons you already described, it kind of added a lot of quality of life features like the weapon switching and whatnot. But I think what really stood out to me was the control mechanics, how they chose to implement like eight-way running instead of like the traditional tank controls.
Yeah.
In that you had the choice, like going back a bit here, like when they released Resident Evil HD, they gave you the option to switch between the two. But with Onimusha HD, you technically had both at the same time. You just simply had to switch between either the analog stick for the eight-way run or the D-pad for the tank controls, which I thought was a really nice touch.
Yeah, I see. Okay, so going off of that specifically, like I do think it's a little weird though that they never added in the option to customize your controls a little bit more, like that Resident Evil HD remaster, because Resident Evil HD remaster, you had 3 different control types, and you can switch between alternative or classic. And for me personally, I when I was playing through Resident Evil HD, I was playing with I think it's Control Type C with Classic on, because that's the closest to like PlayStation 1 Resident Evil controls. And to me, that just made the most sense for Resident Evil 1. Resident Evil 0 is a little bit of a different story, though, because it has different controls. But yeah, I think like Onimusha, that was my only complaint about the remaster, is that even though that's there, they did not give us the option to customize it more so. Because I definitely would have taken that customization option if available. Alrighty, so Singh, if I could just have you read off number 6 here. Singh? Alright. Well, okay, I guess I could read off number 6, and I didn't realize that Brandon was here. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Brandon, if you're around?
Hi, I just woke up.
Hi. Do you want to answer number 5 as well before we continue to move on?
I have no idea what number 5 is.
Number 5 is a follow-up question between the original PS2 Genma and HD port. Which is your favorite, and what makes you like it more than the other versions?
Well, I haven't played game mode, so I could get tossed out the window. I would say the HD port because it has better quality of life changes, but the music and the original is much better.
Yeah.
But due to circumstances, it's unfortunate that we cannot get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's it.
Disappointed in the modding community for not bringing it back. So, just saying. Okay, so I'll read off number 6 since Singh is caught up in something. What was your favorite weapon and armor set overall? And this could be between the regular version or the Genma version.
Well, in terms of utility, obviously the last armor you get in the original and HD port that provide you the best sets or whatever. But aesthetically speaking, though, I'm not sure. I do like him more in red and gold, but doesn't provide me much gameplay. So
yeah. And what about weapon?
Weapon. Okay. Either Fire Sword, Emma's blade, I believe. I forgot what it's called. My apologies.
And Ryu.
And yes, and the Bishamon Sword. That's how cool it looks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
And for me, I would say that I think between my favorite swords, because or my favorite armors, I should say, because I kind of brought this up a little bit earlier. Excuse me. I really like the metal armor from Genma, or even the ogre armor. I think, as ridiculous as like the ogre armor looks, like I just like how cool that stuff looked. And the one thing that I always credit Genma for is that, like, you get the armor set, and instead of just getting a simple color change, because this was before they decided to make all of the armors get leveled up the same way and changed the same way as the swords and stuff. I just thought that always looked so much cooler. And then I've always thought too, like, wouldn't it be cool if we got armors and they also changed and they all had their own, like, utility for uses and stuff like that. But yeah, between the metal armor and the ogre armor, those are my favorite. And as far as weapon goes, Bishamon Sword is always going to be the best one, no doubt. It looks cool. It has purple fucking fire. I can't really complain about it. Second favorite, though, for me, has to be Ryzen, because I think Ryzen just looks cool with all the, like, spikes and shit that it gets on the sword. So alrighty, anybody else?
I guess for me, favorite armor would be the ogre armor, just from a design standpoint. Same thing with Shippu as my favorite weapon. Like, in terms of utility, that part isn't really like that much of a big deal for me. Like, I didn't think there was any weapon that was bad. But in terms of just sheer aesthetics, I appreciate, like, Shippu the most, because it wasn't like a traditional sword. It was more the double blade that was used for crowd control in that sense.
Yeah. It is unfortunately the weakest sword of the bunch. So it's very, despite being a crowd control weapon, it's a very, like, trade-off type of weapon. Like, you're not getting the raw damage output that you would.
Yeah, it's not like something you would use, like, on a boss or anything like that, unless if it was, like, for a specific purpose. Keep up. But yeah, like, just in terms of design standpoint for me, and that's pretty much like my favorite.
Okay. And then I don't know if Divic's still here or not. Probably not. Okay, so alrighty, so Singh, if you can read off number 7 here for me.
Considering that Takeshi Kaneshiro was on board for the remaster and even assisted the project by helping with the redubbing process for the Japanese dub, do you think he'd be on board with future projects? I mean, it's kind of a simple answer. Like, he obviously had no objections with like the HD re-release. He didn't have any objections back when 3 came out. So I don't foresee any issues with him coming back for like an HD remaster of 3 or potentially a new game. Although it'd be kind of hard to imagine how Sasuke's storyline would play out, unless if you take into consideration Dawn of Dreams or not.
Well, in theory, you can make a game that takes place before Dawn of Dreams. In theory, you could, because as far as like the real Semonosuke Akechi goes, like he dies at the Battle of Yamazaki. In lore, because of Dawn of Dreams, he becomes Tenkai. So you could make a game that takes place around that time, and kind of explain why he has to become Tenkai, and The only issue with that, though, is that you have to explain why the fuck his gauntlet goes back from being black and red to gold. Thanks, Ono. And also why he doesn't use fucking Oni orbs anymore with his gauntlet. Because, they only ever explain that in a fucking manga. But, yeah, you could, in theory, do a new game right after 3 before Genma, though. I'm just a little interested to know if he actually is or not, because like I know he's like really he was on board with like helping with the HD remaster. I think he even approached Capcom at the time when they were really in talks of like doing the remaster. So if it was not for Kaneshiro himself, like we would not have this remaster. The thing with 3, of course, is like, okay, if they remaster 3, do they have to get rid of Jean Renault, which is like a pretty big part of the game, right? Like the whole, like, literally, I think it's on the back of the game they fucking advertise that it's Takeshi Kaneshiro and Jean Renault, like that they're starring in it. Like that was like a big fucking deal. Like you don't ever really get that in a game where they're starring a character, So, but I wonder though too, like maybe him and Jean Renault are like on good terms and stuff, and like if you look at like the old like behind the scenes footage for like Onimusha 3, like Jean Renault seemed like he was really enjoying his time like working on that game too. So like I don't know, I would hope that like Takeshi Kaneshiro would be on board for like an additional remaster, or maybe even do like a if Capcom were open to doing like a remake of 1 where they also reuse his likeness again. Obviously having to de-age him to match what he looked like at the time, right? I would hope so, but only time will tell on that, right? Anybody else want to go on this?
My apologies. What question was it again?
This is on
7?
number 7 here.
Oh, yeah, I think this actually said it best though. Like he was on board for returning for the remaster, so I see no reason for him to not be on board for the another project. Though I did find it funny that Capcom brought him over to Tekken, but hide his face, so they don't have to pay him royalties for that.
Right. Yeah, it's so fucking weird. Like, I don't recall if Kaede's face is in the game in Tekken specifically, but I know his is like just hid because of likeness reasons and whatnot. I gotta ask though too, because like I have not played the game with the new Japanese dub. I've only ever played it with the original dub, and the only thing that I know about the new dub is Takeshi Kaneshiro redid all of his lines. He brought in people because like this was done at like one of his studios, so he handled all of that too, right?
All right.
So it kind of makes me wonder if like if Onimusha 3 got redone, would they redo the English dub just to get Jean Renault to voice Jean Renault?
I think, yeah, going back to the dub, I think with one possible reason why they would have had to recast it, some of the actors, I would think, might just be due to like licensing or rights issues, because like with Japan, it's not like how it is in America where like the company owns the voice rights to certain games and whatnot. It's usually owned by either this like the agency that employs the actors, or sometimes the actors themselves or holds the rights to that. So it could just be a simple matter of some actors weren't playing ball with the original release, and then they just simply decided to go with the new dub just to get around that.
Oh, yeah. That same thing does work with like the music industry. Like artists could be a-okay with like say like music being used or reused if like a game is getting released, but the publisher or whoever owns that particular piece of song be like, nah, that pay us a good amount of something for money to use it, right? And that could create problems.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
but
I do think that it's like, it's still interesting to say the least that like they did redub it, and like Takeshi himself like actually like went ahead and had that handled at his like own studio. Because like how many actors, let alone voice actors, do you know of like going out of their way to like assist a project like that for a game?
in that manner, not many to my recollection though. But we do have, like, say, VAs for example, that do have their own studios or whatever that can, help a project. Case in point, look at Funimation with Dragon Ball. Chris Saba has his own studio for recording Dragon Ball stuff or whatever stuff they want to record it.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a rarity though, but no, that's the biggest example I can think of.
Yeah.
But
Uh.
as far as like the dubbing English dub though, honestly, if they get drama rolling, I'd be surprised that they will redub everyone. They should redub everyone, but I doubt it.
Well, so with the English dub, the only voice I really want fucking redubbed for 3, and I know this is a bit off topic, but like, is Jean Reno, because I just want to be able to hear, like, don't get me wrong, like, I think it was Paul Mercier that does Jean Reno's voice in English in Onimusha 3.
Yeah,
And
because pretty much when John speaks in English and the English dub, you literally just hear Leon.
yeah, you just hear RE4 Leon, and it's like, it's
Dude, that fucked me up so hard because I was so used to. I mean, I like Jean Reno. I've been watching Jean Reno since I was a kid. My mom showed me La Femme Nikita when I was younger, and I was like, "Oh God!" and it fucked me up. And so, like, The Professional and Ronin and all that kind of stuff that he's in, like, he's great in all those movies. And so then, like, I'm like, "Oh, cool! Jean Reno's in Onimusha. That's awesome." And then, like, he speaks English, and I'm like, "Ooh, that's not Jean Reno at all. Oh boy, it's gonna be one of those." When he's speaking French, it's Jean Reno.
yeah, as
But
Jean Reno, he did the French dub.
but oh man, wow! I was like, oh fuck.
Yeah, and that's the only reason why I would want like don't get me wrong, I like the cheesiness of
Oh, it's
having
great.
RE4 Leon voicing
But it,
Jacques,
but it fucked me up really hard.
but how much cooler would it be, right, to get Jean Reno, right? Assuming like they also do an Onimusha 3 remaster, they get Takeshi Kaneshiro to come back and agree to do all that stuff too, right? Like, so. Yeah, I think I think it would be an interesting thing to see. But again, too, like I'd also be interested to see maybe Takeshi Kaneshiro do like a remake or a new game with Capcom as well. And then Divic, I know you just got back. Did you have anything else to say on 7 before we move on?
I did want to say, because I know I had to take a call really quick with the weapon stuff. I know you guys already talked about that, but
Yeah.
NLU is the best thing ever to happen to any survival horror game ever, and I will die on that bloody fucking hill, because that thing will carry you so hard once you get it to level 3. It's disgusting.
Yep.
I somehow managed to do the what the hell is it called? Not Bloody Palace.
Phantom Realm.
Phantom Realm. Thank you. I don't know why.
Well, it's Phantom Realm and then Dark Realm in some games. So like
yeah. So
they really
the
throw it
20
around.
stage one where you're going through to get the ocarina.
Yeah.
Man, that thing carried me so hard. It was really stupid. That and mistakenly doing the instant kill technique by just mashing the X button because I'm dumb just carried me. So, but yeah, as far as 7 goes, it would be awesome if he did it. But I know Capcom, like everyone's already said, Capcom's super weird about that kind of stuff, with like royalties and actors getting involved. I mean, look at any kind of Japanese-produced media that's doing a remake or bring certain people on or whatever. And it always gets kind of weird in regards to like their talent and all that. Either they, like I always think of the case in Judgment where like they just pretend that actor doesn't exist anymore. But like, I don't know. I would love to see that. I would love to, have a redub and do all that shit. But whether it actually happens or not remains to be seen.
Because I mean, like I said, the only well, and like the question mentions too, it's like the only redub that has happened is with the Japanese dub, and that was done by the likeness of Samanosuke, or the guy that is Samanosuke, Takeshi Kaneshiro. So he did that all in his studio. He redid it, all of his lines. He got some of the original actors that were a part of the original dub to redo their lines in Japanese as well. And then they hired a couple of new people to replace some of the actors they could not get back. Whatever the reason may be, I have no idea, because it could be a number of different reasons. Like they didn't want to come back, they're not alive, or maybe they got into some illegal shit and they're not involved in entertainment or voice acting anymore, right? So
yeah, it always depends on the illegal shit though. If it's like drugs, can't do that.
But yeah, you're fucked. You cheated
on
somebody, you're fucked.
Things, oh no, but if it's other horrendous things, like you have, really, really unsavory, terrible things in your possession, everyone like applauds you like you're a hero and fines you like $1,000. So.
Really?
Oh, dude, look up Rurouni Kenshin's author.
Yeah, I know about that. Yeah.
Oh man.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
The author of One Piece still defends that guy, which like I get it. He made a very amazing manga, and it's still incredible to this day. But
he broke and he broke the law after they changed the law. Like that was the thing.
Yep.
Because he was doing it when it was still legal there, but that's neither here or there. So, but yeah, I'm aware of Rurouni Kenshin. Yeah,
they got some weird fucking rules over there.
Yeah. So,
people are backwards and they're wrong.
Yeah. Anyway, since we're on number 8, I don't think Brandon read off the question yet. So, do you want to go ahead and read off number 8 for us?
What's your take on the original Fragility composed soundtrack and the new soundtrack used in the remaster? Well, I already said this already technically. I do prefer the original. Generally speaking, though, the new one's not necessarily not bad. It's still Onimusha score, still really fucking good soundtrack. If anything, it sounds more like Resident Evil, ironically, than what Onimusha original did, though. But preference-wise, the original is still bass, so I love it. It's a shame that we can't see it again because, motherfuckers are fraud.
Yeah. So, yeah, that whole situation, and I kind of want to talk about this too. Like that whole situation with the composer was so weird because, like, if he didn't do that fucking interview that very day where that person that was interviewing him caught on, like, I think we would have gotten our fucking original soundtrack. He just made one fucking mistake. That's all I'm saying.
If I recall, like, it wasn't until sometime after that interview occurred before, like, can't remember his name now, but the Ghost Rider came out. That was something that happened well after the fact.
That happened after the interview itself, because the interview itself, like, the person that was interviewing him was like, yeah, you don't seem deaf to me at all. And that's when it came out that he wasn't. And then sometime after that, I forget the guy's name. I talked about it in my review. I think the guy's name was like Nigaki.
I only know his last name.
Nigaki, I think it was, right?
Yeah, Nigaki, but I can't remember his first.
Well, yeah. So he came out and he was like, "Yeah, I'm the ghostwriter for the Onimusha soundtrack."
I don't think it was for the Onimusha soundtrack specifically, though. He definitely did contribute to some songs, like in Summer Gochi's general career, but I don't think it was ever clarified if he had a hand in either the RE1 DualShock release or Onimusha in general. I don't think that was ever made clear.
I believe they did specify that he did. With RE1 Director's Cut, it was like something like he only had like a week's time to do that shit, so he didn't really know or care. And with Onimusha, it was more of an involved process that he was in. If I'm not mistaken, that is. But
I always liked the strings of the original soundtrack. The string, like, because it's mostly a string score, if I remember correctly. It's like an orchestral style score, and it's really fucking cool. And it's very evocative of the time. But listening to little samples of the re-releases, new soundtrack's pretty good. It feels like it's more like going for this like this horror theme, like it's leaning way more into that.
mm-hmm.
And the original soundtrack leans more into like a heroic theme. I have yet to play the HD remaster fully through, so I'll have to like actually do that. But I mean, you know, if music in this era of games is any indicator, it changes the mood of these games, like especially the Resident Evil style games, like quite a bit. So I'd actually be really, as soon as we get off this call, I'm installing it. Really curious to see how the game feels with the new soundtrack. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm kind of in the same boat of like, yeah, I prefer the original soundtrack because that's the one that I grew up with. And you know, like the waterfall theme, for example, in the original is like the best song. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, that's like the one track that everybody kind of points to as being like the song that's kind of like really associated with Onimusha, right alongside the like main theme for Samanosuke himself.
Oh, what song?
For what?
Which song are you talking about?
The waterfall song, and then Samanosuke's
yeah.
theme in the original soundtrack.
Yeah, Waterfall is definitely the best one.
But like, you know, with the remastered soundtrack as well, there are some really good tracks in there that, like, honestly, like when I think about it, I'm like, you know, like if I just assumed, like if I just heard the soundtrack and nobody told me this is for the Onimusha remastered for Warlords, right? I would just assume that, like, but you told me that it was Onimusha, like it was a soundtrack for Onimusha. Just you just didn't tell me it was for that, right? I would say that like it is good enough that it would have worked in a new game as well, and I think it would have been way more fitting in a new game. But of course, due to circumstance, they had to use this soundtrack, and unfortunately, because of that, a lot of people weren't aware or didn't really want to look into it or didn't really care either way. It did cause people not to buy the remaster, not realizing that from a legal standpoint, Capcom could not use the original soundtrack. So, I mean, I mean, you know, with that new soundtrack though, it's there are some pretty good tracks, and I would argue like the new Kaede's theme is probably one of the best tracks in the game, right alongside the Phantom Realm theme. Those two, in my opinion, are probably the best ones. All right. Anybody else want to go on this one?
To be quite honest, I don't really have a horse in this kind of race because, like, for me, like, I did experience the original soundtrack first technically, but that was back through YouTube videos because I couldn't play the game myself.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I played the HD version, I don't really recall much of the soundtrack on that version. So, like, just to sum it up, I'm pretty much indifferent on both.
Gotcha. Alrighty.
Fuck you, you're wrong.
Okay. Alrighty. So, alright. So, why don't we have Divic read off number 9 here?
All right, number 9. Sorry, I'm talking about fuckboys in the chat. Number 9. Do you think Capcom should re-release Genma content even after the release of the HD remaster? And if so, how should that content be released? Patch, DLC, or a separate release? I definitely think they should release it. If they released it as DLC, because the HD re-release is $20, like $5, $10 DLC, I'd fucking buy it in a heartbeat.
Realistically, I think they're just going to do a separate game because, like, structure-wise, they're not the same game, so it's like impossible for them to just, DLC it just into the game without changing quite literally the whole game, right? So, the best case scenario is a separate release.
God damn it, Capcom.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's not like I had problems giving Capcom money in the past. So I mean, like, they re-release it, they'd say Genma Onimusha now with like 50% more Kaede or whatever the fuck they throw. Oh, fuck it, all right, cool, here's money. That's just how it goes with Capcom with me these days.
Genma Onimusha with Jubei mode.
Dude, I would hear you thunderously come all the way over here.
Yeah, right.
If that happens, then I need someone else to get mode into.
So okay, or Jacques mode. Jacques mode would be pretty fucking cool. Yeah. Like, I'm just fucking throwing out ideas because they did do this weird thing with, like, they released Remake HD, right? And that was like the bare bones minimum for a remaster, and then they come around with fucking RE0 HD and like just threw everything at it. New DLC, new game mode, like, and don't get me wrong, like, Resident Evil 0 is a decent game. It's not the best Resident Evil, but
careful.
Huh?
I'm kidding. I'm like, careful now.
It's not the best Resident Evil, but
he's right.
It's not the best Resident Evil, but it's not like when people say it's a bad Resident Evil, I'm like, I don't know. I don't think you've really played some of the worst out there, because there's far worse. So but I think that they would do knowing Capcom, they wouldn't do a DLC for a game that they've already released. They would do a separate release, and not only that, they would not release it on the PC. So it'd be PS5, Xbox Series exclusive, and they would have it where you'd have to pay for it again, and it's a separate release, and it would also maybe have some additional DLC that the game didn't have, or some new content that the previous HD remaster didn't have. That's what I think.
I probably disagree on the whole PC part, because it's not like the same situation with Devil May Cry Special Edition, because there's at least been some time between now and from when the HD remaster was released. So I believe it was about 3 years at this point, if I'm not mistaken, or 2. I can't remember.
Wait, for what?
Yeah, I just can't remember when the HD remaster got released.
So Devil May Cry 5 came out in, was it 2019, right? The remaster came out around the time, I want to say 2018. I remember the promotion for Dante and Monster Hunter World was around the same time as well.
I'm trying to see here. So yeah, 2019 in January. So in about a couple of months, it would be 4 years actually. So I'd say that's more than enough time to justify a separate release compared to what happened with DMC5 Special Edition.
Right. No, actually, I have a question to ask this too, though, but I'm sure Don, you're in that.
I'm here.
If Capcom had to add actual original content, what would it be for you guys? For me personally, though, this actually would be a lot of work for Capcom because they don't like put in a whole lot of effort for certain DLC stuff. But I would like them to do like a pseudo mercenaries mode, like original RE3 mercenaries mode for Onimusha. Just go around, do shit, and walk away. At least gives you skills to play as other characters, in the game. Because you barely play as Kaede in 1, for example, right? And for Onimusha 2, that'd be a great way to play as all characters in a one dedicated mode.
So Onimusha 2 has some it actually does have a mode where you do play as all the characters. I forget the name of the mode, but there is a thing for it where you do play as all of them. But in Onimusha 1, as far as like new content goes, I think what I would want them to do is maybe if they went out of their way to actually try to bring in some more cut areas from like the PlayStation 1 version that we don't have in the official release. That's, I think, what I would want. Maybe an additional boss that wasn't there in either Genma or vanilla release. And then maybe be a little bit ridiculous and like throw in a new playable character that was not playable, because like I kind of talk a lot about this, like specifically when like, and Brandon knows, because like whenever we start talking about Devil May Cry, I say like, you know, wouldn't it be cool if like they remade Devil May Cry 1 and then gave us like Nero as a playable character, even though he was never playable in that game, just to give us more characters to play as in Devil May Cry 1. Like, it doesn't have to make sense from a lore perspective or anything like that. Just give me more shit to do in that game for fun. Because like RE0, for example, and again, I'm only bringing this up because they handled it this way. RE0, you have Wesker mode, and you play as RE5 Wesker with some of his abilities from RE5. So I think, like, you know, if I think about it, like, wouldn't it be really cool if we could play, like, some of the characters from the later Onimusha games? Alternatively, too, because I was kind of talking about this with the upcoming Onimusha anime, wouldn't it also be cool if we got some content in reference to the Onimusha anime? Even if it doesn't necessarily make sense from a timeline perspective, like, it'd still be cool just to see, like, a little reference to it. And especially if, like, you know, in the future, if that is what triggers more people to get into Onimusha.
So,
I mean, I wouldn't doubt them including an out of their character. I mean, we had like what back in the day RE2 with Tofu, so anything's possible.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna break it to you straight, guys. I secretly work for Capcom. I've heard what you want. So I'm gonna announce here right now first, world reveal. HD remake of Onimusha Blade Warriors exclusively.
Let's fucking go.
Oh god,
that would be actually fun.
It is fun, but that would be the Capcom move, right? It's like everyone wants, oh my god, I want Onimusha 2, blah blah blah, and like, okay, we heard you, Onimusha Blade Warriors. Like,
well,
it was Onimusha Tactics on the Game Boy.
Well,
now Onimusha Tactics, yeah, exactly.
So I will make a bit of an argument for Blade Warriors in particular, right? The reason why I'm making an argument for Blade Warriors is because the save data for that game transfers over to Onimusha 3 and vice versa.
No shit.
Yeah, so you get the panda costume from Onimusha 1 in 3 if you have save data of Blade Warriors.
Sweet.
And the Genma that Seminosuke kills in the intro cutscene in 3 becomes an unlockable character that you can get in Blade Warriors.
Oh, sick.
So, like, if they could somehow, like, do that shit again, like, I'm all for it. So,
you know what? I'm glad you mentioned save file, because this is not related to 1, of course, though, but for Onimusha 3. But love of Christ, man, let us Americans have the option to, you know, use the save file of the first game whenever they decide to release that game.
yeah, because that was the other thing, too, that the Japanese version for 3, if you had a save file of 1 in your memory card, it would unlock the classic 3 weapons from 1 into 3. And you wouldn't have to do the Phantom Realms in order to find the gems and get them in a follow-up run.
That's pretty sick.
Yeah, so like shit like that would be cool. But
Yes.
but in regards to 1, right? Like, yeah, give me new stuff, but like if they did a re-release of Genma, that's how I think they would do it, because Capcom typically seems like they like to do stuff like that. Unless if they do something in a similar situation to like the Mega Man collections, where they release like multiple versions, and I think they do both like North American and Japanese versions of those games, if I'm not mistaken.
That's generally how they do things nowadays.
Yeah, so I think that'd be cool if they did something like that for like an Onimusha like collection that included Genma in there. Especially because like the redubbing is pretty much done. Like they don't have to really redo anything.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure they didn't introduce any new dialogue for Genma. It was
Uh,
literally just the cutscenes.
yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, they also reuse one of the lines in the Phantom Realm when you get to the final fight in the Phantom Realm. So it's nothing like new per se, but everything else is the same. So it's really just a matter of porting over that content. Um, so yeah, I think it would be cool if Capcom did that. Alrighty, so we are on the next question. Singh, if you want to read off number 10 here for me.
Do you think Capcom is done with Onimusha because of the remaster for Warlords? I mean, we've already seen that they're already signed off on an anime that's already mostly complete in production at this point, so I have my doubts that they're done with it. But I would think maybe just getting a new game tends to be a bit tricky sometimes, just because, and this kind of applies to a lot of Japanese companies, where if a series ends up going on hiatus for a while, it's not necessarily because, oh, it's not doing very well. Sometimes it's just a matter of they need to have someone on staff to advocate for them. Like, for example, like Street Fighter was on hiatus after 3 up until Ono took the reins over and more or less made a good pitch that became Street Fighter 4. And then trying to think of another example off the top of my head. You had a
Mega
Soul
Man.
Calibur 6 was an example where like 5 just didn't do very well, but the real reason why they didn't do another game for so long was because the guy in charge of the series at the time left, and it wasn't until I can't remember his name stepped up and said, "Hey, let's do this."
Yeah, it was
Same
like
thing with Mega
the
Man.
CEO's son of Capcom, who's now like lead of the fucking fighting game division at Capcom.
And never mind that too. Mega Man 11. I
Yeah,
forgot what
part
his
of
name
the
was
reason
too.
why 11 happened was I think it was because nobody was advocating for it at the time until what was it, Digital Eclipse pitched and got to release the first Legacy collection, and then Capcom saw that there was interest, and that inspired, I can't remember his name, but he was like, "Yeah, let's make a new game."
Um, it's the same guy that handled RE0 Oda something. Fuck, I always talk about how like we need more people like him at Capcom. Fuck, I need to look this up now. Capcom Oda. Koji Oda. Koji Oda was advocating for it. And I like Koji Oda's thought process of like, you know, okay, like take a look at Mega Man. He made the whole fucking staff on board for that game alone to replay every single Mega Man, look at all of the forums, both old and new, to see what people liked and disliked about each and every single Mega Man game. He also, I think he was also looking at like fan comments of like what people would want out of a new Mega Man game, and it was just really like that whole process led into this is how we're gonna make Mega Man 11 based off of all this other feedback plus all of our input at like of actually playing the games, right? And we don't have people like that at Capcom that make the staff actually play the games and look at like, okay, what is what people like, what is what people don't like, what works very well, what doesn't work very well, and let's apply that into making a new game, right? Because I think something like that would be fucking amazing for a new Onimusha game. That being said, I do agree, and I have made the same opinion as well on my recent video, in that I don't think Capcom is necessarily done with Onimusha, because if we were done and they were just shelving it because of the sales of a remaster, according to, one person who has no actual evidence to back up any of those claims, why would we even be getting an anime? Why would Capcom ask for continued support of a franchise that they were done with? Like stuff like that just doesn't add up, is all I'm really getting at.
Yeah. I don't think they're done with it per se. More like they have their hands full with a lot of other projects that they couldn't get Onimusha off the ground for another game.
And
Granted, though, that doesn't excuse them not able to make remasters because they can outsource that.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as like a new property, yeah, I can understand why Capcom would be hesitant on making a new one right now, because at the time they were making Devil May Cry, Resident Evil 2, then 3 came out.
Yeah.
Supported Resident Evil 7 to a certain degree, yeah, they
Monster
were
Hunter,
full.
yeah,
Yeah,
there's a lot, and that was the other thing too that I was saying, doing more remasters might not be in their top priority at this time, because they have all these other projects that they're working on. Like right now they have fucking Street Fighter 6, Resident Evil 4, and I'm sure now that the projects that they're working on have been kind of freed up a little bit. They still got a couple of other ones like Pragmata and Exoprimal and stuff like that, but now that it's been
Don't forget
freed
Deep Down.
the game that's never coming out.
Yeah, Deep Throat.
Someone had to bring it up.
Yeah, well, dude, I'm telling you,
why break it
Pragmata. Dude, I'm telling you, Pragmata is the new Deep Down. But yeah, but that's what I'm getting at too. And I do absolutely agree with that point, Brandon, because I do think that them not working on a new Onimusha remastered or even a new game as of yet might just simply be due to the timing of all these other projects, plus before Onimusha, well, once Onimusha 1 remastered happened, we had COVID-19 happen, and so that put a halt on a lot of other projects too, I'm sure. And so
it hurt Monster Hunter, that's for certain.
Yeah, and I'm fairly certain that that Capcom wouldn't just be like, okay, well, we're just going to remaster the one and not do it. Because typically for most of their remasters, they do try to get as many of the games out from a franchise within a trilogy, with the exception of Okami, I think, was the only one that never really got the other games remastered. Or the only other game that it had remastered.
Okami had handheld games, so that makes sense. That would be a bigger penny as a port over.
Yeah. But typically, right, Devil May Cry. Devil May Cry has gotten all of its PS2 games ported. Mega Man, for the most part, with the exception of a couple of the spin-offs, right, has gotten pretty much all of the games ported, right?
Yeah, the mainline ones, yeah.
Yeah, so it's
Mega Legend so far.
Resident Evil, I don't really think I have to go over, Resident Evil gets ports for the most part, with the exception of very, very specific spin-offs, but every mainline Resident Evil has gotten some port or another at this point. So I'm just saying,
Well, I mean, technically, we're still short on the originals, the original trilogy and Code Veronica, but...
Yeah, but for the most part, right, we've gotten Remake, we got Zero, we got 4, 5, 6, we got 7 to Remake, 3 Remake, all got their updates for PS5 and Xbox Series. Yeah, Capcom is, generally speaking, pretty good about porting over all of their games when it comes to if they're doing a remaster for that franchise. They don't just leave it at just the one.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. Does anybody else want to say anything before we move on?
Divic?
I mean, I'm You know, I always assume whenever Capcom brings stuff out like this, that they're just kind of done with it. I'm just used to Capcom kind of having this thing where something sells and it doesn't sell as well as they hoped, and like, people don't like it, and then they just like don't do it forever. So I'm just kind of like, the anime makes me think that maybe there's some renewed interest in hopefully making some HD ports of the games and all that, but nah, man, I don't know. I've got the game itself as it is. I am good. If it re-releases, cool. If it doesn't, then it's kind of like whatever. It's, or maybe I'll lose the last little shred of hope I didn't know I had. I don't know. It'll be one of those two.
like well, and the point you made about like, yeah, Capcom like does the thing and then they're like, well, it didn't sell well, therefore we're not going to do anymore, right? Like, I think part of the problem is too is that like, and this goes for like any company really, is like, well, it's like it didn't sell well because you didn't really advertise it. It didn't sell well because you didn't really push the fact that it, like, yeah, this is a thing now, and you didn't let people know that it's available. Or you did a thing where it's like, because I did, this is something that I did notice a lot when it came to the remaster, was like, people were simply refusing to buy it just because of either the soundtrack or the fact that it was not the Genma port. Which is, like, both of those reasons to me is very silly, really, to think about, just because of the fact that it's like, those are the same people that are probably just like me asking for a new Onimusha or for Capcom to do something with Onimusha, and you're just gonna let it die because of one of two things. One of which Capcom has no control over. The other one is, you know, at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, it's a port of a game, but at the end of the day, it's what is more important, that we get the remaster and that we get more games out of this franchise, or it just stays dormant and Capcom doesn't acknowledge it at all.
Right.
So,
I can't understand the soundtrack part thing only loosely if you're not aware of the situation behind it. You know, if you are aware, then you don't have excuse to be upset about it, because come on, nobody can use it.
yeah.
Or be willing to use it at that point. But as far as the game port, I'm like, like, it is what it is. Take it or leave it, you know, like, type deal. Because no, we can't be picky right now when it comes to only Lucia.
Yeah, yeah, and that's kind of where my stance was. But I am still and very strongly much of the opinion that I don't think Capcom is really done with Onimusha. I do think that eventually we will see remasters for 2 and 3, at the very least. Whether we'll see remasters of Tactics, Blade Warriors, and Dawn of Dreams is probably a whole nother subject in on itself, but at the very least, I do think that we'll see 2 and 3 remasters, at the very least. But that's a matter of only time will tell, and you know, I do hope that, like, I do hope that we see more, at the very least. I hope Capcom isn't just done with it just because, you know, just because of one remaster. And I hope that, you know, that my point is proven right. But, you know, again, only time will tell on that one. Anyway, any final thoughts?
You know, all I can say is if something like Ghosts and Goblins can get a new game after a 12-year hiatus, I would say, like, Onimusha's probably got a good chance of lasting a lot longer than we think it would. So
True.
Onimusha comes out, but it gets the God of War treatment, and Kaede just talks to you through the puzzles constantly.
Oh, God.
Damn it. Can I go for a day without hearing this?
God damn it.
Listen, I love that game. It's really great, but everyone needs to shut the fuck up just for 5 seconds while I look
I
at the puzzles.
agree, man, but I have other issues with God of War Ragnarok. But, like, holy shit, man,
God
that right
boy.
there just, that shit gets my nerves. And, like, can you shut up? I know what to do here. It's pretty obvious.
God.
just want
Yeah.
to take Mimir's head and throw it as hard as I can, like the Leviathan axe. Just
Now, I want to throw it at Andreas if you want to shut the fuck up.
Alrighty. Well, anyway, yeah. So, I hope in the future too we can talk about the other games as well, because
oh damn right,
like,
I need to beat 2 because it's fucking amazing.
yeah,
I
I'm
agree,
gonna
too.
after this call is done, I'm gonna gush more about 2 because 2 is an amazing fucking game. So, but yeah, like in the future, I'd love to be able to talk about the other games because, yeah, because they're great games, and I don't think that. As far as I'm aware, I'm like one of the only few people that ever talk about Onimusha so much. So I want to be able to talk about it as much as I can, whenever I can, because I love this franchise. But anyway, with any other final thoughts that may or may not be said at this point, let's go ahead and do outros. Brandon, where can we find you, sir?
Twitter, and we're Brandel. Link to you somewhere. Everyone else is none of your fucking business.
After that, where can we find you, Divic?
Oh, Divic on Twitter or on the Discord talking about how Liam Hemsworth looks like a fuckboy.
Okay.
Jesus.
That was Arian, not me.
All right. All right. I'm not getting into all that, but next up we got Singh. Where can we find you?
Well, assuming your Twitter hasn't blown up yet, you could find me at Twitter on handle is Singh_long, which is still very boring as always.
Yeah. And you all can find me as BioDevil_Dom on YouTube, Twitter. Yeah, pretty much those places. I've got videos that I'm working on, some stuff that I'm scripting, and hopefully sooner than later I can get a particular review that I've been meaning to get out for a couple of years now out. But we'll get to it when we get to it. But until then, if you like the video, you can go ahead and like it, comment, subscribe. If you like Onimusha, go ahead and share this around to other people who might like Onimusha, and we'll see you around and hopefully talk about some more Onimusha in the future. See ya.